Okay, folks, welcome back to another exciting episode of Family Justice Denied. And we're sticking with that name, Joni. We're not changing it anymore.
No, I agree with you 100%.
uh, so today we really didn't have a subject matter picked. So Joni and I kind of were on the same brain length wave, and that's kind of scary. But what we're going to talk about today is the false allegations of domestic violence in these domestic relations courts. Now, Joni, I think you'll agree with me is that is the number one go-to for a lot of these cases and these attorneys is that they try to figure out some sort of abuse or anything on children or on the spouse or on the partner. So one of the things I pulled up was I wanted to know how many cases are actually filed on average in these courts and how many pertain to domestic violence. So we're just going to jump right on into this. So according to the internet, 2.1 million cases are filed annually in domestic relations courts. Now, this is divorce, this is custody, all sorts of things. Now, one of the things that got me is I asked how many of these cases are involving domestic violence, and it told me domestic violence as a factor in custody disputes. About 40% of family court cases involve allegations, keyword there, allegations of domestic violence. More specifically, nearly 60% of the custody disputes involve domestic violence allegations. So, based on those figures, if we assume that 2.1 to 2.5 million cases are filed every year, 40 to 60% of those cases involve some sort of allegations of abuse. That's roughly 840,000 to 1.5 million cases that pertain to domestic violence of some sort. So that's a huge number. We're not talking penny.
I just lost you, Clint.
Okay. So if we're averaging those numbers, I mean, that's 840,000 to 1.5 million cases that use allegations of abuse in these cases. I mean, we're not talking pennies and dimes. We're talking 50-cent pieces and dollars.
Yeah, and Davia actually just sent out something with all sorts of stats in it, also about falsely accused. I'm actually going to try and pull it up here if I can. Um, let's see. Nope, wasn't that one. Here we go. I'm going to try this link and see if it's here. Nope, that's my link. That's my proposed thing. Here. Okay. So on Davia's site, which is the coalition, which is domestic violence, what it stands for? Domestic abuse, violence. I can't remember what the acronym is, but it's basically they discuss their premise is domestic violence. They have a website called End Domestic Violence, Coalition to End Domestic Violence. Um, the they just put out a bunch of stats and conducted in 30 countries found that 55% of persons believe that women who say they are abused often make up or exaggerate claims of abuse. And then they did some further statistics here. To curb the growth of false allegations, lawmakers need to make these changes. Renowned so-called believe the victim and trauma-informed investigations. And they need to require hard evidence, not a mere accusation, increase penalties for false accusers. Examples from the United States, they have a few laws. Um, in Connecticut, we have the proclamation that was passed. But when we get to the surveys that were done in Argentina, men are sick. False allegations target millions, right? But men are targeted 16% to women 7%. In Australia, men are targeted and falsely accused 18% to women. UK, men are charged falsely 6% to women's 2%, and the United States, men are charged 11% to women's 6%. Um, in fact, women most often are the accusers. So that's pretty big. That's, because, and I'm kind of tired of hearing from these women who claim, oh no, women are being accused way more than men, and there is a lot more abuse out there of men than men are doing, and women aren't abusing. Well, then please explain to me all these cases with women who either murder or hire somebody or influence somebody to murder their ex-husbands.
Well, one of the things I was curious about is, we've talked about it before on episodes, is why are these allegations of domestic violence not passed over the criminal court? And one of the things I found is that, and this is kind of odd, in my opinion, even if an allegation involves violence in these cases, which could be a crime, and usually is in most states, courts, family courts, domestic relations courts usually treat them as a custody factor, not as a criminal matter.
And that's a huge problem because anybody being accused of abuse is being accused of a criminal act. Oh, by the way, I want to clarify what DAVIA stands for because my brain just could not think. It stands for Domestic Abuse and Violence International Alliance.
Okay. So, and the thing that I
Oh, you just cut out.
for it, but protective orders are issued, and rarely are they ever passed on. And if they do, that's up to a state prosecutor or county prosecutor, something like that. Um, what I also pulled up was according to DOJ, OJP data, only about 25 to 30% of reported domestic violence incidences nationally result in criminal prosecution.
This does not surprise me.
Research shows 40 to 60% of custody disputes involve DV allegations, just as we discussed. Of those, only a small fraction are referred to prosecutors because judges and attorneys often argue the court's role is to decide best interests of a child, not to prosecute crimes. And we've said this repeatedly, these domestic relations courts, family courts, cannot adjudicate criminal matters. But you would imagine that these judges have an obligation to pass this on to a DA, as a solicitor, whatever they want to call themselves, and they don't.
Yeah. And we really haven't we really haven't figured out why is it that the courts are insisting on keeping criminal matters in a civil proceeding. It they don't have the authority to adjudicate on them. Therefore, they can't even if they found that the person had committed abuse, they can't even charge them technically in a criminal act. All they can do is maybe issue a restraining order, remove their parental rights, but they really can't even adjudicate as a criminal matter as to is this a jail sentence? Does this require mental health assistance? What is this? Is this due to them having a substance abuse problem?
One of the things I pulled up, and I found this statement very funny. There's also a concern about, and what got me about that statement was we believe that if you lie in court, you're going to go to jail or pay a fine, contempt of court sort of stuff. But these judges don't even do that. They take what's being told to them as the gospel and they run with it.
Yeah, I actually have a recent case that I was given to do supervision on. And the mother is the one that's being supervised. She provides me an old court order from April and doesn't provide me the newer court order. She makes her little claims, and I tried to do an intake with her, and she keeps blaming the father, claiming he's abusing the kids, he's sexually abusing the kids, how the pediatrician didn't see it and changed their decision, and DCF didn't see anything, and they're all against her. Well, I go and I said to her, I need you said you have an updated court order. I said, I need to see this. I get the updated court order. You name a behavior that would be alienating, and this mother had done it. From accusing the father of sexually abusing the daughter when it turned out the daughter had a UTI, a urinary tract infection, claiming that because the kid's scratching and rubbing herself that she's sexually being abused. No, she had a urinary tract infection and was irritated. Claiming that she's bleeding vaginally. Well, she's bleeding because she's scratching so hard because you didn't take her to the doctors with the UTI. Okay? Then getting the kids to make erroneous statements, claiming that, oh, my father touched my private part. Well, tell us more about it. Well, I don't know anymore. My mother told me that to say that. Oh, my mother told me that happened. Or the DCF gets to the parent's house, and they're talking to the kid or walking around the house, whichever it was, and the kid just blurts out, "Oh, my daddy touched me." This is so clear that this mother is alienating these kids and creating false scenarios and making and influencing the kids. I can't tell you how damaging this is to these kids.
One of the things, everybody knows I'm a number cruncher. I do my research. And one of the things I found is we talk about peer review articles and stuff like this. These are people who work in these systems, who are experienced in these systems, and they go through these journals and studies and stuff. And one of the statements that was made was multiple peer reviewed studies of DV allegations are found to be intentionally false in domestic relations courts.
Yes, it's horrific. But it's well, we know that one, the attorneys will hint to their client to make these allegations because they get control of the case, and then they can remove the other parent for a minimum of 6 months, sometimes, if not years, during which time they inculcate the kid to believe that the other parent abused them when they didn't. But this client that I was showing that, I'm like, as I'm reading this, it was so obvious that these kids were being coerced or told what to say or do, because there would be no discussion of anything. No one's even asking the kid a question, and the kid's blurting this out.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
just,
one of those was why courts see so many unfounded cases. I mean, that was a straight up question I asked. And it gave me different legal standards. Family courts use preponderance of the evidence, while criminal will require clear and convincing or beyond a reasonable doubt. So basically, it's telling people that the reason these courts are hearing all this is because they don't have a full-fledged standard, that they allow this stuff. We've already said it multiple times. They allow hearsay, they allow false allegations, they allow just about anything in the kitchen sink to come into these courtrooms. The other one was most DV happens without witnesses. Now, as a journalist, I've covered domestic violence stories and stuff like this, and that is true, and it's common knowledge that most domestic violence happens behind closed doors, as the term is used. But that doesn't mean that these accusers can simply come into a courtroom, make an allegation that potentially could ruin a person's life and get away with it.
yeah, I mean, I agree. And well, part of the problem here is, so I'm going to go back to this case again. This mother has admitted that, or let me clarify, this mother states that she was physically and sexually abused as a child. Okay, wait a second. Are you projecting your injuries, your trauma through the children onto the other parent in an attempt to save little you because nobody saved you when you were a child? It's very possible. And that's a lot of why you see some of this and these allegations is because the person making the allegation was actually abused and nobody saved them. So they're still trying to heal from it, but they think, oh, well, they don't understand that just because it happened to them doesn't mean it's happening to their kids. Just because a child is rubbing their private parts doesn't mean they're sexually abused. Just because a kid has an infection there doesn't mean they're being abused. It happens. Children get vaginal infections. They go swimming, they didn't clean properly, and maybe the water had a bacteria in it, or they didn't clean their vaginal or their anal area or whatever properly. And it's interesting.
Things I pulled up was perjury
Again, I don't know if you're there.
and intended to deceive the court. So that's a lot of reasons why they're not prosecuting these things in criminal court as perjury. But here's the kicker. If there's no evidence of the abuse and the person makes that statement, there's no history, as we keep saying, of abuse. The person lied straight out.
I don't disagree.
Called the chilling effect, which family courts are cautious about punishing allegations because it could discourage genuine victims from coming forward. Judges often say better to hear all claims, even weak ones, than silence a true victim out of fear of punishment.
I didn't hear the whole thing, because you cut out a little bit. So I didn't get your whole statement.
Okay, they don't do this because what's called the chilling effect. It's family courts are cautious about punishing allegations because it could discourage genuine victims from coming forward. And judges often say better to hear all claims, even weak ones, than silence a true victim out of fear of punishment.
And yes, that is what they believe. And the problem is, somebody makes a claim, we're taking too long to determine if that claim is real or not. It should not take weeks or months or a year to determine if the claim was false or true. Because if it's a false claim, you've now psychologically abused the children and put the children in a position where they're being taught to believe they were abused when they weren't. This causes a child to have a victim mentality. And growing up with a victim mentality is an unhealthy position to be in, especially when there has been no abuse, because you can't get treatment for something that didn't happen. The treatment isn't going to work because it never occurred. And therefore, the person who's inculcated this false allegation for the child to believe and created false memories has actually psychologically abused the child.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it pulled up some recent U.S. cases involving false allegations. One out of Texas, Webb County, false TV report and custody dispute. A 27-year-old woman falsely reported that her husband assaulted her, apparently to influence a custody issue. The evidence she presented dated back all the way to 2023 and wasn't relevant to the incident she described. Investigators uncovered the fabrication and was charged in June with filing a false report, classified as a Class B misdemeanor. Consequences included up to 180 days in jail and a $2,000 fine or both.
There was another case that just came through with false allegations of a woman who did that and got arrested. I'm not. I'd have to look to see if I can find it, but I know it came through to me from one of my sources recently. I'll look for it while we're talking, but I'm not seeing it so far.
Well,
Anyway,
Illinois was another one. Under Illinois law, if a parent knowingly makes a false abuse allegation during a custody proceeding, the domestic relations courts may refer the case to the state's attorney's office and impose civil sanctions, which are fees, costs, money. These actions can take place even without criminal charges, highlighting the intersection of civil and criminal accountability. California, which seems to have the most, California family courts address false DV or child abuse claims aggressively as a state. If a court finds a parent knowingly made a false allegation, it may order supervised visitation, reduce custody rights, or alter parenting arrangements. The courts can impose monetary sanctions, including paying the other parent's attorney fees. In extreme cases, the court may hold the false accuser in contempt with potential fines and jails. I mean, it's all fine and dandy, but they just basically stated that they don't prosecute this stuff because they
Mhm.
don't want to scare away real victims. But what about the person being accused of all this?
Right. How the effects on that person are traumatic. I mean, you can't even begin to even justify it. It's so bad because of the damages that ruins. They lose their livelihoods. They lose their jobs. They lose um their their identity. They lose their friends. Th- no, they don't even have a life anymore because they're so afraid of what'll happen and what people have said.
And even if it's found out later that none of it happened, their life has already been altered.
Yup, it's already
People,
been destroyed.
society always has that thought in the back of their head. Hey, they accused him of it. Granted, the courts didn't hold him accountable, but maybe he did do it. Maybe there was something to it because she made the statement. So when these allegations come out, this stuff follows these individuals their entire life. You and
Correct.
I both know parents who have ended their life because of this sort of stuff.
Yep. I've lost several clients because they didn't know how to, they couldn't defend themselves against the false attacks any longer. Just didn't, and they didn't have the money and they just felt like their life was done and over with. And they were still being harassed and didn't know what to do about it.
And even in those situations, we got to go back to best interest of the child.
Mm-hmm.
The children have to deal with this as they continue to grow up. Hey, I was told my parent abused me, abused my mother or father. And now that they're gone, that child has to deal with it. That child may feel blame, self guilt, something along those lines. And they're
Yep.
going to have that absence in their life.
Yeah, they don't get that back.
Yeah. So where is that in the best interest of a child?
There isn't, obviously. And but that's the problem. The people that are doing this don't understand that what they're doing is harming the child. They think, "Oh, what kind of harm could it do?" And it happened to me, so I'm protecting them because it still could have happened. That maybe he's still doing it and nobody knows and nobody's recognizing it.
But here's the other aspect of it. It's not work. I mean, it's not just private cases, it's also state cases that this is coming into.
Agreed.
Social service cases separating children from parents because of an allegation.
Yep.
And then found it later on not to be true. They still pursue these things.
Yeah, and that's this part that's just absolutely unacceptable.
Or how about, we talk about accountability, transparency on the show a lot.
Mhm.
What about these attorneys who perpetuate this stuff?
They should lose their licenses. Any attorney who's suggesting to somebody that they should file allegations of abuse when they're not even true, I'm sorry, they need to lose their license. That's unethical as can
But
be.
across the board, the majority of people who perpetuate this stuff in the law, attorneys who are filed complaints on, nothing happens to them. It's very, very, very rare that a ethics committee or whatever they want to call themselves hold these attorneys accountable. I mean,
I
in South
agree.
Carolina alone, in the last 15 years, no judge, no attorney has ever been held accountable for any complaint handed into them.
I mean, it's so mind-boggling that this even it's so mind-boggling that our professionals in the courts are just letting these things slide. They don't do anything. And okay, yeah, we get it that the theory is that it's going to, if we penalize somebody for filing false allegations, those who are truly being abused are not going to report it. Bullnet. If they're truly being abused, they're going to have solid, verifiable evidence of it. They're going to have the bruises, the broken bones, if there's really being abused. So,
Well, I'm going to argue that fact. I'm going to play devil's advocate here because nowadays we're seeing more and more DV being mentally applied instead of physical. And we can't leave that out, that domestic violence includes mental abuse, programming of these victims and stuff. So, but even then, an honest, trained professional psychologist can see that. But again, nothing happens. They just take these people by their words.
yep.
These allegations came out. They went to social services, do the investigation. Social services refused to do these sort of investigations because they're told, oh, the judge is only going to see we're investigating you. And that's going to hurt you. Criminal court, they're found not guilty of these things. Family courts continue it, even though they're not supposed to. So where is the answer to stopping all of this?
Better training, better education. Stop being afraid to penalize somebody for doing something wrong. Because if you don't penalize them, then more and more cases of false allegations come through because they know they're not going to get penalized. But if we start to penalize, the false allegations are going to subside dramatically, and those true cases of abuse will be obvious because the evidence necessary to prove those cases will be there.
How about this one? This is something I just thought about as you were talking, is we know that the domestic relations courts use a completely different rule of law,
Right.
preponderance of the evidence.
Correct.
In the minute that a divorce or custody aspect involves domestic violence, it should be transferred to a clear and convincing rule.
Yes, I would agree.
So we're no longer under the preponderance, which allows everything in. Now you're stating a possible criminal aspect. Switch it to clear and convincing. You have to prove what you just told me.
Right. Well, and it should always be a matter of proof. If you haven't got a pediatrician, emergency room, or other a professional who says, "Oh yes, your child's been abused," you don't have physical proof, then you can't make these allegations because we have no way to adjudicate whether it's really going on. It's kind of like this. You can't claim that somebody has cancer if you don't have the evidence to prove that they have cancer. To have somebody believe that they have cancer when in fact they don't have cancer, that's just traumatizing.
Yeah. One of the things that got me is, as we've been doing these shows and we've been talking to parents and professionals and everything, is that the majority of these sort of cases, there's no police reports of abuse. The cops have never been called to the house or anything. It's like they've all of a sudden, within a 24-hour period, sprung up with all this abuse and stuff. Now, granted, that happens in domestic violence cases, but usually there's some sort of key in. Cops have been called before, hospital stays, something like this that have happened over the time. But in the majority of these cases, none of this stuff exists, but the courts allow it in. So do we change it legislatively?
It's a good question. I would say, I think we really do have to change it legislatively, or that there has to be a court mandate that shows that in order to claim domestic violence, there has to be verifiable proof of it. Witnesses, physical evidence of some sort, because there are just too many false allegations. And all you people who are being abused and claim, and and they want to claim, oh, I'm being abused, and don't nobody's listening to me. Well, you can blame it on those who are filing the false allegations, because there are so many more false allegations, especially when it comes to custody and divorces, than there are anywhere else.
You know, because you made that statement, I find it interesting that when you do the research, which we do, the majority of true domestic violence organizations counteract these false allegation individuals. They say prosecute them, put them in jail, because they're damaging our cases. They're damaging our history, our survivalness of it. So, we've spoken off and on about organizations that claim that DV organizations that claim parental alienation doesn't exist. It's a weapon that the abusers are using to gain power and all this. And we're not denying that there are individuals like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the reality is the majority of these are not.
Right. Or it's a fight that's been blown out of control. The one person pushed the other person on the shoulder with one finger, but that becomes abuse. No,
Yeah.
that's not bloody abuse. You didn't get hurt because they took their pointer finger and touched your shoulder with it. You didn't get,
It's
isn't
funny.
a parent grabbing a child by the arm and pulling them from getting hit by a car. Abuse isn't my bracelet got stuck in your hair and I ripped some hair out. This is not abuse. But parents are actually teaching your kids that these things are abuse.
It's funny because I had a consultation when I was going through my divorce case with a private investigator. I wanted, like most parents, I think there's maybe something fishy going on. Maybe there's somebody else. So we had a consultation with a private investigator in Columbia, South Carolina. And we spoke with the secretary, very nice secretary. And she sat down. She asked me, so what's going on? And so I gave her the case. And she said, well, who's the opposing attorney? The minute that name came out of my mouth, she looked at me, put her pen down. She said, I know that attorney. I went to that attorney for my divorce, and it was an amicable divorce. We had only been married for like 6 months, but this attorney pulled out a sheet of paper out of her desk, slid it over to her, and told her, what can we get him on? And it's all listing abuse allegations. And
Yes.
she even told the girl, this is what got me. She even told the girl, if there's not anything on the list, what can we make it look like?
That attorney should have lost her license.
But that's one out of how many that do this.
I know. But if people don't start reporting that this is what's going on, and any parent who is going through a divorce and has an attorney hand that to them, they should get up and run, because that means that attorney really doesn't give a flying F about their family. All they care about is the dollar signs and winning. They don't care about the best interest of the child, because if they cared about the best interest of the child, never would they have recommended or suggested somebody file or create a false allegation against another parent.
We get a lot of parents that contact us individually and the organization asking us for attorney referrals. And we have a ton of attorneys that truly do care.
Yes, we do.
They are there with their clients. They make it a part of their life. And those are the ones I think that need to be brought out more. Law school, because I lived near Columbia, South Carolina, where they have the USC Law School. I actually went there several times, spoke to students, spoke to instructors, and come to find out, when it comes to family law, they're not given a lot of detail on how to protect a child. They're taught on how to win their case.
Mm-hmm.
So where does this deviate? Where does this deviate on instructing these new attorney wannabes on the best interest of a child?
Supposedly, The law schools are now supposed to be teaching these kids the collaborative process instead of adversarial. Most of our attorneys are trained in the adversarial process. So can you imagine somebody who's taught to always go to war, go to war, go to war, go to war, and then you put them in a family case and you want them, and you're told they're supposed to mediate. They can't mediate. They don't know how to. They've been taught only to go to war. So this is a serious problem. And the new attorneys are supposed to be trained collaboratively, but I can almost bet you when they get into working in the law firm, they're going to be working with an older lawyer, and that lawyer is going to teach them to be aggressive and to go to war because it's the only way you're going to make money. Go to war. No, war doesn't make more money. It makes more trauma.
Yep. I tell people when they call me and ask me for lawyers in South Carolina, I said, I don't give referrals except in extreme cases that I think might be needed. And I tell them if you don't want to go with that lawyer can't take your case. Do your research, look the lawyer's cases up, ask them for referrals, good and bad. So you
Correct.
know what you're getting. Even with DV victims, there are a lot of attorneys that aren't trained on this. They're facing their abuser. So they don't get that mentality aspect. But you take that and you transfer it to children in these cases. Folks, we're talking about a whole new jigsaw puzzle at that point.
As I have been saying for decades, our children are the future leaders of this world. And if we continue to raise them in the manner that is being raised in these divorced families where there's high conflicts going on, where they're taught false memories, and even those that are being abused, if these are the children that are going to run our country, we got a big problem because they're not mentally stable to do so because their whole life they have been living has either been one big trauma of lies or they have no concept what reality is.
I want to pause here for a second because I'm looking something up real quick.
Okay.
Uh,
In the meantime, while you're looking that up, we know through years of research, children are like sponges. They absorb everything, especially when they're very, very young. As they get older, they the hope is they're getting critical thinking skills. The problem is when you have a child who's been traumatized at a very young age and that person is still psychologically abusing them, convincing them that they're victims of abuse, convincing them that the other parent is doesn't love them, doesn't care about them. This child's emotional and mental health are stalled. Their executive functioning skills cannot progress age appropriately. They actually get stuck at the age when the abuse began, and if they progress, it's at very small increments, so that even by the time they're 18, they might still be behaving like an 8, 9, or 10-year-old, because that's as far as their executive functioning has been able to progress because of all the trauma, the false allegations, the lies, the having them believe false memories. This all causes severe trauma to a child. And I'm not saying abuse doesn't, but with abuse, a child, you can see it, you can feel it, you can go to therapy for it. But when somebody's being told to believe that they're a victim of abuse, yet they don't have any real memory, all they have is a false memory, their brain can't justify it. Their brain can't go, oh, yeah, that's right, I had a bruise on my arm. Or, oh, yeah, that's right, I had a broken leg. they go, my mom says I had a bruise. My dad said I broke a leg. My mom said he tried to hang me over the railing. My dad said she tried to run me over. This child, because they don't remember it, all they have is a false memory. So they don't even have an actual physical event that they can draw upon. They can only draw upon fantasy. And when a child or a person lives in nothing but total fantasy, they can't ever progress and grow.
Okay. Well, here's something I wanted, and this is why I had to look this up. Was let's take, for instance, the most recent Minnesota shooting of the Catholic school.
Correct.
2 children died, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. Now, what caught me about this case was that the shooter had switched his name when he was a minor to from Robert to Robin. He identified as a female. Okay. And throughout all the articles that are out there about this individual, there's no mention of the dad.
That's what I was
For the
wondering.
Catholic Church for a long time, uh, all these aspects that we talk about on the show that children psychologically go through, this incident fits that profile. No mention of a father, whether divorced or anything, but they portray this individual as having psychological issues. And, we mentioned on an earlier show about gender identification with a lot of these children.
They have identity issues because they are psychologically splitting.
Damage is being done to create individuals like Westman.
Agreed. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, and somebody can go look it up if you want to try, that 95% of all the mass murders are people who are from high conflict divorced families.
Yeah. And it's in the high 90s. I don't know, like you said, I don't know the exact number, but when I looked it up for articles, that number was in the high 90%. So are we saying all these were in the best interest of a child?
Forget the child. Was that in the best interest of society? We have to look at sometimes the larger picture here. Are false allegations in these high conflict situations and removing one parent who's a good parent in the best interest of society? If the bulk of these mass murders are coming from children or from people who have had difficult childhoods due to high conflict custody battles, that's not in the best interest of the child. It's not in the best interest of society. And if it's not in the best interest of society, you've now exponentiated the problem from being one child to 24 kids at Sandy Hook. Adam Lanza was alienated from his brother and his father by his mother. He was mad. Yes. Could this have caused an exponential to his mental health condition that he already had? Probably since birth, absolutely. We know that kids with ADD, ADHD, and go through a high conflict divorce get even worse. So they start giving them medication that's really too much, and now the kid can't sleep because it's too much medication. I've also seen it where the kid doesn't have ADD, ADHD, but the trauma of being torn between the two parents, they don't have anywhere to express their emotions. They don't have the words to put on the paper. They have these feelings that they can't describe. And it's almost like they're itching from the inside and they just become hyper and acting in that kind of a quick, fast-paced or disorganized manner. And when they go to put these kids on medication for ADD, ADHD, the kid gets worse. Hello, folks, that's a red flag. ADD, ADHD meds are supposed to bring it down. If they increase it, It means the kid probably doesn't have ADD, ADHD.
Yeah, I know an
And
adult.
worse, and the other part of this being that they might have mild ADD, ADHD, and it's curbing some of that, but then the kid can't fall asleep at night, and now you're having to give them sleeping medications to go to sleep. Okay. Could it be that maybe it's too strong a medication, and maybe there's another underlying issue here that's not ADD, ADHD?
Oh, I mean, I know an adult, and they've been on diagnosed at age 14 through a divorce and everything of having ADHD. But the medication, like you said, doesn't bring her down. It jacks her up, and she's all over the place. And she's been on this medication since 14. She's getting ready to turn 40. The damage that this stuff is causing, and now she has kids of her own who have lost their family basically for what it's worth. Now they're being traumatized because that cycle that we keep talking about. You know, you can point fingers and blame everybody in the room, but no one's asking how do you stop it?
Right.
How do you prevent it?
Why? And what it bothers me is we can't come to the, if we try to come to the table with the people that are naysayers that claim, oh, parental alienation doesn't exist. Domestic violence is only committed by men. Only men claim parental alienation. If we can't sit down, many colleagues of mine have tried to sit down with these people and talk and have a reasonable conversation. They won't sit down and talk, or it has to be their way or the highway. Whoa, we need to be able to sit down at the same table. Bipartisan. Hello, folks. Stop blaming it on a gender. These are not gender issues. And the more you claim it's a gender issue, the more you set this back from anybody getting help. The day we take gender out of it and we can sit down and talk about solutions to these issues and how to stop them, is the day families will start to heal, is the day our family courts will start to function like the way they are supposed to function. Stop blaming genders. Stop, stop
You know,
refusing to come to the table to work out. We had areas we all agree on. We all agree that abuse shouldn't occur. We all agree that false allegations shouldn't occur, because we have parents who are making who are having allegations made against them, of course, that are false. We all agree on both sides. We all agree we need to keep the kids focused. It has to be on the kids. We all agree that the parents need to be healthy. So why can't we come to the table, and those are the things that we establish finite law on, so that we're not having this problem. And it shouldn't matter whether it's a mother or a father. These should be the finite laws. They should be complied with. The court should, in fact, none of this should be in family court, because family court really is not doing the right job. It really needs to be managed by professional mental health people who understand it and get it, who understand mediation, and that mediation isn't a one stop and shop thing here. Mediation takes a good year, could take 2 years for you guys to figure out how to mediate and co-parent together. And I'm not saying it's fun, and I'm not saying you're not going to piss each other off. But reality is, to the day your kid dies, you're still a parent to that kid. And even if you try to remove that other parent, they're still a parent. Even if the parental rights are taken, they still are genetically their parent.
see, that's what gets me. Now, since I stepped in the family court arena, I've always told people, and I've always thing is, take these nomenclatures of mom and dad, male, female, out of the damn picture. You're talking about parents, you're talking about children. That's it. That is the bottom line of the matter. And everybody has their own opinion on it. And we welcome their opinion. Opinions is what makes the world go round. But when it comes to our children, let's be realistic about it. They don't have the faculties, the understanding, the emotional growth to be able to deal with this stuff, and we're putting it on them.
And it's got to stop. Our
You know,
children,
are judges doing the right thing in these cases? Opinions vary largely on that. Some will say yes, some will say no, some will say some judges do it and some judges don't. The bottom line is the family courts don't have any guidelines on these subject matters. If you're allowing everything into these courtrooms but the kitchen sink, well, actually they allow the kitchen sink in there too. How can one individual, a judge who doesn't know these individuals, doesn't know their families, make a logical, justified decision in the best interest of these children?
it's worse than that, hun. Because many of these judges actually know this, but they're connected to one of the parties somehow, or they're connected to the party's attorney. And when a ju when those when the we have good judges out there, they're far and few in between. It is like the bad parents who keep filing false allegations. There are a lot of bad judges out there who just don't care. They want to make the money and run, or somebody's got dirt on them and they're holding it over their head. And I suspect that is another large part of it. Is some of these people are that dirty that they go dig up dirt on the judge and hold it over the judge's head.
But then
But
we
like,
also get back down to the bottom line of money.
yep, it's still money.
It's the bottom line. You know, it's been around for centuries. Follow the money, you'll catch the crime.
Right.
Even in look how many RICO cases, you know, we're following that big one that are now pertaining to family court as a RICO charge.
Yep.
You know,
I
it's
did try to email that guy, haven't heard back from him.
and well, you're probably not going to. They probably have a gag order on it right now. But the thing about it is, how much is a child's well-being actually worth financially in these court systems?
That's an interesting question for another day. What is the value of a child? What is the monetary value? What is the emotional value? What is the physical value? Are we have are we children really commodities? I think this is a good point where we could stop and maybe discuss that part another day.
Yeah, yeah. Now we have some guests coming on, or Ron and Sherry. I
Yeah,
want to
Ron
just
and
let
Sherry
our
Palmer from
Palmer,
Family Courts.
and they are going to talk strictly about the Constitution and the family courts. Uh, they're very well known. They've written several books on this subject matter. We're going to be honored to have them on the show. Um, so that is an episode that I think a lot of people need to start paying attention and looking out for, is because I think the information that's going to be put out in that episode is going.
So I think this is a great spot where we can end for the day. I want to thank Clint for running another great show with me, and we'll see you next time. Oh, and don't forget, September 9th is International Falsely Accused Awareness Day. If you can try and get your governors to do a proclamation for it, great. Go on your state website, look up proclamations and how to do them. You may not be able to get it this year, but maybe you can do it for next year. Take care.